Good evening, everybody, and welcome to King Jordan Radio for a special edition Friday. It is Friday the 13th here on King Jordan Radio. Tonight on the show, we are going to bring on Michael Jackson's former attorney. Tonight on the show, we will discuss the death of Tom Sneddon, Michael's long adversary. It's Prince Michael Jackson's birthday. We'll talk about that. What's going on with the Wade Robson case, the 10-year anniversary, and some look-backs of as we get 4 months to the day. And now, ladies and gentlemen, let me please introduce to you, he is a criminal defense attorney out of Los Angeles. He defended Michael Jackson in 2005, and Michael was acquitted on all counts. He is currently in a trial, soon to be in a trial, that he will do pro bono out in another town, and we'll let him talk about that in just a second. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome back to the show, Mr. Tom Mesereau. Good evening, Tom. How are you?
Hi, Jordan. I'm doing very well. Thank you for inviting me to speak on your show. It's always an honor and a privilege, and I look forward to participating tonight.
Yeah, there were a couple of angles that I wanted to go, but you had a chance to meet up with the youngster. He's a teenager today, and I'm talking about Michael Jackson's child, Prince Michael Jackson. First of all, give me your thoughts on him.
Well, I first met him during Michael Jackson's criminal trial. He was a young child. I used to go to Neverland before the trial and a few times during it, and I had a very, very unique opportunity to watch Michael with his children. And it was very clear to me that his children were number one in his life. There's no question about it. And even though he was trying to shield them from that dreadful experience he was going through, it was obvious to me that they sensed something was going on with their father. And after the day of the acquittals, I went to Neverland, and I was invited to a world press conference, and I decided not to go. I felt I really belonged at Neverland with Michael. And I went to Neverland, was in his house, and I saw his children just hovering all over him. And he told them, who I was, and they came over, and each one gave me a hug. And it was a very unique day. I've always had the very, very strong belief, based on my observations and my feelings about Michael, that he was the greatest father that ever lived. He lived for his children. He wanted them to be protected from any possibility of danger or kidnapping or anything like that. He did the very best he could have done. He wanted them highly educated. He made sure they were well-read, that they understood that he had an enormous book collection. He wanted them to know about every subject. He took them around the world to expose them to other cultures. He wanted them to be very, pardon me, I got a lump in my throat. He wanted them to be very accepting of all ethnic groups, religious groups, races, cultures. He wanted them to be humane and kind and sincere like he was. And my impression of his children, not just, one or two or all three, my impression was that they had the greatest father on the planet, sensitive, kind, honorable. He disciplined them as well. He was not going to let them just run amok, but he wanted them to appreciate the world as it is, to be aware of its dangers, and to be very well-read and well-educated. He did the very best he could do, given the pressures on him, and he was a wonderful father, and I think those children are just fabulous.
If somehow Prince is listening right now, what would you say to him?
I would tell him that he had the most wonderful father on the planet. Not only was a gift to the world, a unique genius, a creative spirit that we've never seen before and probably will never see since. Someone who took all of his gifts, creatively and financially, and rather than being selfish, wanted to heal the world and change the world in a very positive way. And he did the very best that he could do, given the pressures inflicted on him from an early age, to heal the planet, focus on equality, love, kindness, decency. He really wanted to focus the world on its children, how helpless and vulnerable they are, how much they need love and attention and spirit and a feeling of importance. And I would tell him that you have the best father on the planet, and remember who he was, follow his guidance and inspiration. Don't let these negative people who tried to pull him down influence you at all. And I would say carry forward and live his legacy, but be you at all times. Don't feel enormous pressure. Just be you and do the best you can, just like he did.
Absolutely, and happy birthday, Mr. Prince Jackson. Now, being that it is the 10-year anniversary, actually 4 months to the day, can you believe it?
No, I really can't. Time just flies so fast, and we're all trying to deal with the world and deal with ourselves and do the best we can. We're all trying to wade through a complex universe, and it's hard to believe that. But we're all blessed. Everybody listening here is blessed. You're alive. You're healthy. You have options. You have guidance. You have inspiration from Michael Jackson, and I think his children are the most blessed kids in the world. That's what I believe.
No question about it. Now, I do have a very interesting clip, courtesy of Luna Joe, where you actually hear somebody from the Smoking Gun, and when that mini interview proceeds, there's a brief pause for about 30 seconds where you hear Mark Schaffel and his attorney. Now, this is in 2005, so I do want you to hear this, and this is the commentary that was going on around that time. So I will play this for you, and I want to get your take on the other side.
.com, for what it's worth, in my legal opinion, this is so devastating to the prosecution case in the Michael Jackson affair that I cannot see how a fair trial can possibly result in a conviction of that man. Essentially, this is from the child welfare authorities, who in conjunction with the LA cops investigated the very allegation at the heart of this matter, that Jackson had molested the 13-year-old in question. And every one of the witnesses for the prosecution making the claim now against Jackson, the child's siblings, the child's mother, all denied to child welfare that Jackson did anything wrong. Andrew Goldberg is the SmokingGun.com reporter. Excellent job of investigative research there, buddy.
Thank you so much.
There's only 4 of you at the website?
There's 4 of us who do the website.
You cause no end of trouble for people around. But
when you have a small staff, you can really focus.
Well, this is. I want to know what your reaction was when this. I know. I assume you're not an attorney, but the language is pretty plain. What was your reaction when you uncovered it?
Oh, well, we were surprised. I mean, I don't know if you remember or not, but early in February, we posted the declaration from the '93 case of the alleged victim, and that got a lot of feedback from people saying, you're anti-Michael Jackson, anti-Michael Jackson. So later in the year, we get hold of this memo and we post that, and suddenly it's the other side. What are you in the pocket for Michael Jackson? What are you doing? What are you doing? But we thought it was a pretty devastating memo, and now it's a memo which there's clearly a big case file behind it, but it's a memo that, like you said, unfounded. It pretty clearly lays that out.
Unfounded is so clear. Would you?
And the other big case out in California, not Robert Blake, Michael Jackson. There's been a lot of legal maneuvering in his molestation case. Most recently, a motion filed by the prosecution to limit defense attempts to obtain information about the alleged victim and his family. Watch. As you know, defense attorney Thomas Mesereau has repeatedly attacked the credibility of the boy's mother in court, saying that she's only in it for the money, and only brought these allegations to the authorities' attention after she failed to obtain hush money from the beleaguered king of pop. has that information.
Now the prosecutors are accusing the defense of being too aggressive and of abusing the judicial process. They're complaining to the court about what they call the sweeping demands by the defense for the financial and medical records of the alleged victim and his family. And indeed, Tom Mesereau has made broad requests for information he says he needs to back his vigorous attacks on the mom's credibility. But included in the pile of information requested by the defense are the gynecological records of the boy's controversial mother. And unless they know something about her that we don't, that one indeed might be over the top. But otherwise, talk about the pot calling the kettle black. Seldom, if ever, in the annals of alleged crime and punishment has a prosecutor been as aggressive and as excessive in his overuse of such investigatory tools as search warrants as in this case. Talk about fishing expeditions after asking for and receiving the highest bail ever imposed in a non-murder case, $3 million. District Attorney Tom Sneddon has mobilized perhaps the biggest prosecutorial team in his county's history. They have asked for and have received over 100 search warrants so far alone, asking for everything from Jackson's phone records and computer email. All that plus, remember, D.A. Sneddon, who postponed his own retirement to personally prosecute this case, himself conducted surveillance of potential witnesses, demonstrating a level of personal involvement unprecedented in Santa Barbara history.
The judge presiding over the case, Rodney Melville, is scheduled to hear this matter at a hearing in November 29th. The trial is still slated to begin early next year. And talk about kicking a guy when he's down. Jackson's just been sued again in the same week. An antiques and furniture store sued the pop star for allegedly failing to pay a nearly $180,000 bill. Mark Schaffel, a former business associate and well-known porn movie producer, is also suing Jackson, claiming that he's owed more than $3 million in loans and producing fees. The Schaffel lawsuit lists Jackson's requests for money, including $600,000 to buy a piece of jewelry for Elizabeth Taylor, to $1 million to pay the now-deceased actor Marlon Brando for appearing in a Jackson music video. The complaint in the lawsuit, which seems, I think, designed to embarrass Jackson as much as it does to set out a claim against him, also alleges that his need for cash increased as he sunk deeper into drugs and alcohol. Howard King is Mark Schaffel's attorney. Why'd you put that in there, Howard?
Well, listen, we wanted to put all the detail we had in that lawsuit so we wouldn't get the usual response that they can't prove this. We've got all of our facts in that lawsuit, and we can prove them.
But why go into alleged drug and alcohol abuse? What does that have to do with him owing your client money?
Right. Well, because my client is more than a creditor. He's not an antique store. He's a confidant who was there for 4 years for Michael, making money for Michael, loaning money to Michael, giving millions to Michael, and we wanted to put all the reasons in the complaint.
What do you think about that, Joe? Is that sincere?
Well, you know, Michael Jackson sued once a week, Geraldo. I'll tell you that from my involvement with the defense team and understanding. This guy is...
Yeah, you're representing one of the so far, or several of the so far unindicted co-conspirators.
Yes. And you know, I'll tell you that Mark Schaffel, when I don't wish to address his character right now, has some issues, and clearly there are people, a host of people who would line up behind Mark Schaffel and say this guy has burned me and burned me before. But talk about cutting off your nose to spite your face, Geraldo. This lawsuit, to me, is asinine to bring at this point. Mark Schaffel is in danger. He's in danger because he's listed as an unindicted co-conspirator. For him to put in a suit over money that Michael Jackson sunk deeper into drugs and alcohol, which sort of lends credence to the mother, the alleged accuser's mother's allegations in this case, imperils and endangers Mark Schaffel's liberty. And I just think, you know, when you're talking about money and you're filing a lawsuit like this, I think you really need to mark your steps before you realize how far down that path you're going. I think he's in trouble.
Well, listen, there's nothing but the truth in that lawsuit, and if Mark Schaffel ever testified, he would tell nothing but the truth. Is it a secret that Michael Jackson abuses drugs and alcohol? I think not to the district attorney.
Well, I think that's a serious fact in dispute. I think it may not be a secret to the district attorney, but the district attorney thinks a lot of things about Michael Jackson that will be disproven. But for Mark Schaffel to suggest that that's why he's in the dire straits that he's in now corroborates the accuser's mother in this case. And by the way, the accuser's mother in this case is pointing a deadly finger at Mark Schaffel, saying he was part and parcel in this conspiracy. So I don't think lending her any credibility at all when it comes to Michael Jackson serves Mark Schaffel well.
Before you respond, Howard, Gloria, where do you come down on this one?
Well, I mean, I think if Mark Schaffel has a legitimate claim, if in fact he can prove his claim, then he should be able to collect. It's a straight breach of contract case. Apparently, he alleges that he helped produce certain productions that were on Fox that basically were designed to help Michael Jackson rehabilitate his very damaged image after the Martin Bashir interview was aired. And he's alleging that he wasn't paid for some of that. Now, what complicates it is his involvement in the criminal case. I'm going to make a guess, and it's just a guess, but maybe an educated guess, that his civil attorney and his criminal attorney have probably spoken, and that the criminal attorney most likely gave the okay for the civil lawsuit to go forward and thinks that it's advantageous to his client to allow it to go forward.
Well, and Gloria, I would hope that this is not anything more than an extortion attempt, a legal extortion attempt, but an extortion attempt nonetheless to try and get Mark Schaffel's legal fees paid by filing a lawsuit against Michael saying, hey, I'm ready to be flipped. Unless you come clean with some money here, I'm going to be flipped.
Does he know anything?
I hope it's not
that. Does he know anything?
Well, you're going to have to ask Mark Schaffel's lawyers on Mark Schaffel that.
Howard, is Mark Schaffel threatening that if he doesn't get paid by Michael Jackson, he's going to flip and become a prosecution witness in the molestation case?
Absolutely not. This is a legitimate debt. I resent it being called legal extortion. This money is owed. It's documented. One thing you've not heard from the Jackson camp in the last week is a denial of the debt.
Okay.
Payments were made on the debt.
We'll watch.
It's owing.
We'll watch. Thank you all very much.
Okay, Tom Mesereau, what is your thoughts when you listen back a decade ago of Mark Schaffel attempting to sue Michael Jackson in the middle of the high-profile trial that you eventually won?
Well, it brings all the information you just broadcast brings back very complex memories and feelings in me. First of all, it reminds me what an absolute war we were involved in when we agreed to defend Michael Jackson in his criminal case. The poor soul was being attacked from every angle. He was being attacked by the prosecutors who wanted him to die in prison. He was being attacked by former colleagues who either wanted money or were very frightened by the fact that Tom Sneddon called them unindicted co-conspirators. And it reminds me of just how unusual and complicated everything was. In my opinion, Tom Sneddon was so out to get Michael Jackson that he was just deluded. He was willing to stretch the law and stretch the facts to do almost anything he needed to win. And it got to the point of absurdity. If anybody was identified as being around Michael Jackson during the relevant period, the prosecution would either directly or indirectly suggest they were unindicted co-conspirators. And they did that for many different reasons. The primary reason was they wanted to intimidate them away from testifying on his behalf. And when you call someone an unindicted co-conspirator, you know they're going to hire an attorney, you know they're going to be scared to death that they could be charged, and you know the attorney is going to tell them, don't cooperate with the defense, don't talk to the defense, don't show up to testify, and you know that you're going to damage the defense in many significant ways. In addition to that, by calling these people unindicted co-conspirators and threatening them with prosecution, they were allowing the Arvizo family, in my opinion, to testify to whatever Schaffel, Dieter, Conitzer, Cassio, Vinny Amen, anyone who was around Michael. They were allowing the Arvizos to testify to what the Arvizos claimed these people said, and at the same time intimidating them away from coming in to testify for Michael, because they were so frightened that they would be indicted as part of a conspiracy, and because their lawyers would tell them, as lawyers should, because their only loyalty is to their client, to protect the client, the lawyers were going to tell them, don't go near this case, don't go near Mesereau, don't go near his team, don't go near Michael Jackson. And you just reminded me what a battle this was, and how, in my opinion, outrageous and unprofessional the prosecution was. So you brought back some memories. It's quite a while now about what a battle we were in and how everything was done to convict this wonderful person named Michael Jackson. You've also reminded me of just the enormous pressures that Michael Jackson faced throughout his life. You know, as a 5-year-old, he was known to be a genius, but he was only a 5-year-old. He had a 5-year-old's maturity, a 5-year-old's mind, a 5-year-old's vision of the world. And yet, it was known he was a genius. He was performing in adult clubs on weekends. He was rehearsing till 3 or 4 in the morning, sleeping a couple hours, and then getting up to go to school. He was signing contracts at 5 and 6. And you've reminded me of just what pressure this young genius, this kind soul was under. And, you know, people wanted money from him from the earliest times, in my opinion. I wasn't there. You know, I just can, you know, just interpret all this from the person I got to know during that chapter in his life, which was an ugly chapter, the person I know from what I intuited about him when I talked to him, and the person I know from everything I've read and studied. And you remind me that even in his darkest hour, people were suing him. You remind me that even in the most troubled times imaginable, people were after his money. And the pressures on this poor soul were just enormous. And I just, you made me feel very sad and very emotional and very compassionate towards my former client and friend, Michael Jackson. He just was a brilliant artist and a kind, gentle soul. You know, it's funny, my mother, who's in her almost 90, you know, and has mental health issues, she didn't really listen to his music and didn't know who Michael was. And when he got charged, she was watching the television, you know, at her old age home. And I went to visit her one day, and she said to me, Tom, he couldn't do things like this. I've watched him. I've listened to him. He's a gentle, kind soul, you know, and that's all she said. And she was right. So you brought back some mixed feelings about how this fellow was tortured, how this fellow was just exploited, how he was punished for things he hadn't done. And you've also made me feel how honored I will always be to have defended him. But you bring back some mixed feelings when you play these newscasts to me.
Yes, well, being that it is the 10-year anniversary, well, coming up in 4 months to be exact, a lot of things went down, and we will get to the callers in just a second. Just hang loose. The next thing, and sorry to bring the mood down, I do apologize, but I did want you to hear that clip.
I'm just giving you an honest reaction to some of the things I haven't thought about for a long time. The poor fellow was being attacked from every angle. You know, he was being attacked as a child molester, the worst accusation imaginable, worse than being called a murderer. He was being sued for money. He was being put into this complex legal position where people he wanted to speak up for him were being intimidated through certain complex legal strategies by the prosecution, so they couldn't come forward. He was just you know, if someone once described him, it was just like an animal being tortured. It was just horrible. But you've also brought back a feeling of relief when he was acquitted, when he was vindicated. You can't be more vindicated in the American legal system than being charged with 10 felonies and 4 lesser-included misdemeanor options and being found not guilty on every single felony and every single misdemeanor by a very conservative jury in a very conviction-prone community. This was a courthouse that convicts virtually everybody. They would not convict Michael Jackson. The prosecution threw every bit of ammunition at him. They hired every kind of expert. They had legions of police, DA investigators, experts, sheriffs, police, prosecutors. They threw everything at this poor soul, and they were humiliated completely. They tried every trick imaginable, legal and otherwise, and they were humiliated, as they should have been. But the poor soul, Michael Jackson, was, I think, permanently scarred by all this, and I don't know if he ever really recovered, but we did everything we could on our side to preserve his reputation, preserve his health. I always hoped he'd live a long life and come back. But in retrospect, you know, I think the pressures on him were so great. It just, unfortunately, his life was shortened, I think, to a large extent by these kinds of pressures. Think about it. You're on trial for your life. You're worried about your kids. You wonder if you really have a chance.
Scary.
The world maybe is against you. You're worried about your children at all times. That was his primary worry, because he would call me in the middle of the night worried about his children. And at the same time, you're being sued for money. I mean, what a mess, right?
Oh, my. Oh, my. I mean, just the fact you're going to be away from your children and you're going to be away from life, and, you know, essentially your life is over once you go to that place. I mean, it's hell. Even though I was never in there, I just know people that have been around that place, and, you know, especially being called a child molester would have been the worst thing in Michael Jackson's life. So on behalf of the Michael Jackson fans, at least he did not have to suffer any years sitting in an 8x10 cell, thanks to your genius, along with Miss Susan Yu. So that must be noticed.
Well, thank you very much. And, you know, I've always said it was one of my greatest honors in my life to be his lead trial counsel and to go to war for him. But these interviews remind me of what a battle it was. I mean, it was so complicated, so strange, so you had the media looking over everything you did. You had so many people trying to profit from all of this, you know, showing up at the courthouse hoping that somehow a bit of celebrity or fame or money would, you know, touch their hands. And it just was for me, it was an isolated existence because I had to avoid all that, you know, just disappear and not live like a monk, sort of, and avoid the clubs, avoid the restaurants, avoid the hotels. Don't let them set you up. Don't let them film you. Don't let them do this. Deal with all these pressures, and in the middle of it, you're trying to prepare for trial, and you know everyone wants to find some dirt on you because they want them convicted. And you just reminded me with these interviews what a war it was. But I'm happy we waged it. I'm happy we won, and we definitely did everything we could do to vindicate a wonderful human being.
No question about it. On June 13th, it'll be exactly 10 years, and hopefully we'll have you here on the exact date. But we have some callers that want to get into the action. You're on Friday night, a special night here. We're joined with the lead defense attorney for the Michael Jackson trial back in 2005, Tom Mesereau. Let's go out out of state. Let's go to Puerto Rico. Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, my name is Daniel. I've called in before. I don't know if you guys folks remember me, but I just wanted to take a moment to thank you, Tom, for everything you've done. I don't know if I've ever said this before, but I truly, deeply, from the bottom of my heart, appreciate everything you do and continue to do for Michael and his loved ones. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for your kind words.
Well, I just wanted to talk about, because I was watching an interview that you were on with a gentleman called Jim Clemente, who I believe is or was an FBI agent who was going to testify for the prosecution during the trial and talk about grooming things, you know, about the grooming process of pedophiles. And I was watching that, and it was very interesting how you handled that, because it seems to me that Mr. Clemente, in spite of his so-called expertise, he has such an obvious bias against Michael Jackson. He's convinced that he was guilty. And I saw a discussion board on that very video, in the comment sections, where people have laid out the facts to him and how and the complete lack of credibility of any of the accusers, and he just refuses to accept it. So I'm just wondering, what was going through your mind when you were talking to this man, and I'm sure there's others like him that you've come across who they're so thoroughly convinced that Michael was guilty, and yet, any person with common sense and who's actually looked at the facts, and then of course if you actually had the honor to have known Michael as well as you did, I'm just wondering, what goes through your mind? How do you handle that sort of thing, and how do you maintain your composure?
Well, thank you for your question and your perceptions of this whole thing, because my attitude is this. I'm not afraid to confront anybody when it comes to the subject of Michael Jackson. I know in my heart of hearts this man was innocent. I know he was targeted. He was targeted because he was wealthy and famous and perceived as very vulnerable. And that made him a target for all kinds of people, sophisticated, unsophisticated, rich, poor, you name it. People who got anywhere near Michael Jackson thought they could profit in one way or another. And when I first showed up in Santa Maria and met these prosecutors in the evidence locker, I said to Susan Yu, I said, these people are walking on the water. They just think they're on top of the world. They think there's no way they're going to lose this case, and they think they're going to be world famous as a result. And I looked at everything that followed from that meeting through that lens. People want to profit, directly or indirectly. Now, this particular interviewer had been an expert witness for the prosecution. He had worked for the FBI. He was, as he says, I wasn't there, but he claims he was abused as a child, and I believe him. He seems sincere about that. And I think he sees everything else through that lens. And I have no problem confronting people who disagree with my views about Michael Jackson. I will defend him till my last breath. I know the man was innocent. And if you watch that interview, and I haven't, but I remember it, I think I was very aggressive about him. I told him I was ready to take him on when he took the stand, and I was ready to how little he knew about Michael Jackson, and I was willing to confront him about how many false accusations there have been through the years about child molestation in California, the McMartin case, the Bakersfield case, where people and their families were destroyed for life because of false accusations of child molestation. And I raised these issues in the trial with the expert they put on, and I would have raised them with him. And I would have examined him on how many things he didn't know about Michael Jackson and how many things he didn't know about these alleged accusers, okay? So I have no problem talking to someone like that. Everybody has a right to their views. If you hold these views, whatever views you have, if you hold them sincerely and you're not trying to gain something in particular from it, I may respect your right to have your views, but I also may condemn them and I may attack them as well as I can. So, he was very professional and with me. We differed, and that's okay. He only has his perspective. He didn't know Michael. He didn't know the evidence as well as he thought he did. He was influenced by Sneddon and Zonin and Auchincloss. He thought, because he only interacted with them, that he was in the right, and that's okay. But I'm going to attack him every professional way I can.
Well, thank you, Anton, and you guys have a great night.
Well, thanks for your call. I really appreciate your asking that question. It's a good question.
All right.
Excellent question. Okay. Let's go out to 806. Please state your name and where you're calling from. You're live on Friday Night King Jordan with Tom Mesereau. 806, it's your turn.
Hello, Mr. Mesereau. This is Christy again. It's been a while.
Hi, how you doing?
I'm okay. My question, I remember watching a few of your interviews where you mentioned that eventually Michael didn't want anything to do with the Arvizos anymore and didn't want them on his property because of their foolishness. Based on what he told you during that time, do you know if he, told them they had to leave, or did they just leave on their own accord for some other reason?
Well, if you look at the evidence, it's been a long time since I was picking through the details, but Michael really had compassion for the Arvizos, just like he had compassion for so many other families and children. I learned in dealing with Michael that there are many children around the world that he paid for their surgeries. He paid for their doctor visits. He paid for whatever medication they needed to heal themselves. He had great compassion for disabled children, children who had with a lot of hardship. And a lot of this nobody knows about because none of it was publicized. You know about that child in Orange County whose father put gasoline on him and burned him. Most of his body was a miracle he lived. Michael paid for his surgeries to help him. And he did so much of this, and he did it anonymously. He wasn't looking for fame or glory from it. He was doing it from the bottom of his heart. So when I got into this case, I had to learn who Michael was and who these accusers were. And there's no question that he opened up his heart and his wealth and his generosity and his abilities to this family to help their child who had cancer. But at some point, as he told me many times, they began to just assume they were his family. They were calling him Daddy. He didn't mind it at first, but then it got a little too much, as he said to me. And they seemed to feel he would always be there as their family. And they got more and more, involved in his life, and he sensed something was wrong. You may remember, if you watched the trial or followed the trial, that Chris Tucker, my last witness in our case, our defense case, testified that he told Michael, he said, "Be careful, something's wrong." And Michael began to think that as well. At first, he didn't listen to Chris. He wanted to help them because he was so generous and kind and compassionate. But he began to sense something was off, something was wrong, and he didn't just kick them out or throw them out. He wouldn't do that. Michael didn't know how to do that. He began to just distance himself from them and not be around, and he didn't want them to be hurt. He didn't want them to feel, just aggressively thrown out off the grounds. He just wanted to just kind of disappear and was hoping they would. Michael didn't want to confront them in some unkind way. The child had cancer. The family had a tough upbringing, in East Los Angeles, and had monetary problems, domestic violence problems, and all that. But he had to sort of distance himself in a sort of what he believed was sort of a quiet, kind way. Didn't want to confront them, but, one thing led to another, and my belief when I tried that case, and my belief now, is that they just got very angry about that. There was, you're bringing back some old memories. When I cross-examined Gavin Arvizo, I think I asked him about him being angry at Michael Jackson and him thinking Michael was off the premises and then looking one day at a distance and seeing Michael. And my understanding was that he was very upset and his family was angry about that. And, I believe that they turned on Michael viciously when they realized they didn't have a future with him. And that's how I saw things, based on the facts that were given to me. That was my opinion.
K806, is there anything else?
Well, of course I was thinking, he had more patience than I did at that time, because if that were me...
Michael was a kind person. He didn't like to confront people and get angry at them. He didn't want to be perceived as mean. He didn't want to act mean, and because of that, he was perceived as very vulnerable. And people thought they could take advantage of this wealthy genius, who was the most famous person around the world. They would see him trying to be kind to people, kind to disabled people, kind to elderly people, kind to children. And it made him a target. made him a target throughout his life, and because he was such a target, I think it made him kind of lonely too, and distrusting, and there was a lot of sadness there because he would try to reach out and be kind to people, and they would take advantage of him at some point. Have I answered your question? Okay?
Yes, you have. Thank you.
Okay. Well, thanks for calling. I appreciate it. I'm just telling you the truth, what I believe.
We definitely thank you for the call, and please hold on. We will get to everybody. Let's go out to area code 916. Please state your name and where you're calling from. You're on next on King Jordan Radio on a Friday night with Tom Mesereau. 916, it's your turn.
My name is Sandra, and I'm calling from California. Hi.
Hi.
I'm calling because I'd like to say, oh, my voice is going away. I'd like to say that I think that this seems to be a repeated theme in the victimization of Michael, where people who are withdrawn from Michael's energy seems to put him at peril. And, he has the right to withdraw his energy from people and so forth, but it seems that when he withdraws his energy from people, that's when people seem to go on the attack. And I seem to think that this is a repeated pattern, and I kind of wonder about the response to that.
I agree with you. There are a lot of people that want to get close to Michael, and most of them could not because he was just a single human being with limited time on the earth, with limited time during his waking hours, with enormous responsibilities as a musical genius, as an artist, and as a humanitarian. So when he wasn't pursuing his musical interests, creative interests, his interest as a choreographer, his interest in the studio, he did his best to help others and heal the world as best he could. He was primarily a father. Once he had children, he realized, I have to spend most of my time with these little children who I love and who are, my pride and joy. And you take all those time constraints, and when he could, he tried to help others. As I've said many times, and as most of the listeners know, he had a rule that when he went to a concert to perform, he would always try to visit a children's hospital. So if you put all this together, he only had so much time to do so many things. But he always tried to heal children as best he could. The Arvizos, in my opinion, were very aggressive. They went after Chris Tucker, in my opinion. They wanted to talk to Adam Sandler. They wanted to talk to, Chris Tucker. They wanted to talk to George Lopez. They had this, in my opinion, an odd modus operandi where they were trying to talk to celebrities. And it seems like the one who was taken in the most, I believe, was the most famous of all, Michael Jackson, because he was vulnerable, he was kind, he was sensitive. He heard this child had cancer. He couldn't resist trying to help him. And, even when he was warned, he just felt, I'm going to do some good for this family. And they managed to get his attention despite all of his other, obligations and responsibilities and requirements. As the best-known person in the world, as one of the unparalleled geniuses in the world, they managed to get his attention. And he did what he could to help them in every way possible. And you're right. I think there was a pattern in his life of trying to open himself up periodically and always being disappointed. And it resulted in some sadness and some loneliness, and it also confirms what a great person he was how despite all of these obstacles, he did his best to heal the world. And I will always, as I've said many times, have very wonderful feelings about Michael Jackson. But you've identified a pattern that I think is accurate.
And I sort of wonder about your feelings, Tom, that I've wondered about for a long time, about the feeling that this kind of attraction that he has to, global attraction, but even on that personal level, how that in its opposite side of things engenders a feeling of being dangerous to others because it's such a powerful, energy. And the kinds of comments I've heard over the years about death threats during the trial, death threats later, death threats before, and so forth, and how sort of bona fide those were versus, sort of crazy fan things or crazy, people things in terms of how he's perceived as having been a dangerous person because he was such an attractive element on the planet.
Well, because he was the most famous person in the world, because he was an unparalleled creative, musical, artistic genius, and because he was an unparalleled, kind, compassionate person who was able to act out his kindness and compassion on a very large stage and in a very large environment, I believe he was extremely vulnerable to those who wanted to take advantage of him, to those who felt by just being near him, they would glean something that would enrich them in some level. This is a very unique individual with unique stature and unique energy, as you pointed out. It created, in my opinion, enormous pressure on this poor soul to perform and at the same time protect himself. And it just resulted, in my opinion, in a very, very, at times, difficult situation where he wanted to be a kind, compassionate, decent person, where he wanted to use his extraordinary gifts to help others and to heal the world. And by doing that, he became an enormous target. And at the same
understand that. Yeah.
And he also wanted his children to grow up in a healthy, normal, environment. And he was very concerned about their protection and their development, that they grow up as compassionate people, educated people, sensitive people, and that they grow up happy. And you throw in all this complexity into a situation, and it's not easy. It's not easy being the most famous person in the world. It's not easy being such a genius who sees things and understands things that we don't see and don't understand. At the same time, trying to bring normality to your children, very difficult situation, in my opinion.
Yes, I understand that.
And
what are the options?
The options are to do the best you can do, to be the best person you can be, to deal with these pressures and obstacles in as kind and compassionate and humane a way that you can, and do the best you as a human being can do. And I think he did.
Yeah.
No question about it. Okay, let's go out to California, I believe this is. Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Yeah, this is Mark from California. How you guys doing this evening?
Doing all right.
Good evening. Welcome to Friday Night King Jordan Radio with Tom Mesereau. What is your question or comment, please?
Yes.
Okay, let's go out to, lost the callers. We'll call back, hopefully. Let's go out to, I believe this is New York, 631. It's your turn. You're on the phone with Tom Mesereau on Friday Night King Jordan Radio. 631, it's your turn. Please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, this is Steve. I'm calling from Long Island. I just wanted to know, like, I'm an intuitive person, like a spiritually intuitive person, and I just wanted to know if you see, like, odd things ever that remind you of Michael, or, you know, anything that says that he's, you know, he's around you or anything like that.
Well, you know, the answer is yes. The answer is yes because life is not simple. And we live in a world that's characterized by a lot of violence and greed and a lot of selfishness, okay? And as economic issues become more prevalent and as the ability to succeed, make a living, be educated, buy a home becomes more difficult, at least in America, I see people becoming less compassionate, young people becoming less generous, less concerned about their fellow person, less concerned about people who are less fortunate than them, and more callous to a lot of the suffering and poverty and deprivation in the world. And when I see that, for example, I think the incidence of internet fraud is increasing because a lot of young people want to get rich fast. They know there are enormous obstacles to making a good living, and they see things as very competitive. And the last thing they're interested in is kindness to others and kindness to the less fortunate. When I see that, I'm reminded of Michael Jackson and the fact that the most famous celebrity in the world, one of the most wealthy men in the world, one of the greatest creative geniuses in the world, didn't want to just party it up and have a lot of selfish fun and just enjoy things for himself. He wanted to make a difference in his own kind, compassionate, generous way. And when I see what I just described, I'm reminded how special he was and what a unique inspiration he was to the world. I guess that's my answer.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yes, thank you. It's nice talking to you again.
Well, thank you. And you know, this comes from the bottom of my heart. It's what I really believe.
Okie dokie. Have a nice night. Thank you.
You too.
Okay, let's go back out to California. I believe we got Mark back. Mark, are you there?
Yeah, I don't know what happened there, but Dr. Klein, kids look so much like himself. Have you ever noticed that yourself, Tom?
Notice what? I'm sorry, I couldn't exactly hear.
The likeness on those three kids. Do you see how much they look like? Those three Michael kids look so much like Dr. Klein. Have you noticed that?
I really haven't.
You haven't?
No, I really haven't.
So observant then. You can't be. He even said he gets talked to every day by people that say that he has that kind of high resemblance.
Well, who do you think is like Arnie Klein? Because I haven't noticed it.
Yeah, you take another look next time.
I will.
There are people that say he looks. The kids look like everybody, but at the end of the day, as we talk about Michael Jackson's kids, he raised them, he brought them up, and he's their father. at the end of the day. And
Tom,
I think you would agree with that.
Klein wanted to do for Michael. He was so good to him. You know, they went to different kinds of parties, and he witnessed certain acts that Michael did in hotel rooms and everything like that. And he liked him so much. He had such a great time with him that he bore 3 kids with this girl that used to work in his office, and they were all good friends at one time.
Well, I mean, I've heard these various versions of what went on or what didn't go on, and I wasn't involved in that relationship, and I wasn't involved very much in Michael's experiences with his physician. I was.
Are you friends with him at all? Are you friends with him? Are you friends with Klein?
I mean, I don't know him very well.
Yeah.
I don't know what really went on or didn't go on. I'm a person who doesn't judge others unless I really know the facts. And quite honestly, I don't know a lot about Michael's relationship with Dr. Klein. It wasn't a concern of mine in a criminal case. You know, I was only focusing on whatever it took to acquit him. And his relationship with his various physicians was not a major concern to me. My concern was beating these horrific allegations that the prosecution had launched against him that could have ended his life in prison. So I don't know a lot about his relationship with Dr. Klein. I never looked at the medical records. I don't know a lot about it at all.
That's like a situation with Dr. Klein, Dr. Howard, Dr. Klein.
Well, I mean, I'm not going to judge Dr. Klein when I don't know the facts. I don't. From what I've heard,
and just for the record, he did not state that the kids were his. He just acknowledged that the kids that he
needs to do some type of a blood test and get that squared away. Like someone like his kids, they can always be the fact that they can be like father and son, and daughter and father. They could be like brothers, old now. You see the resemblance. Next time you look at that.
But you know, I don't know the answer to any of this. I don't pretend to be an authority on things that I'm not an authority on. All I know is I saw Michael with these 3 beautiful children. I saw the love. I saw the concern.
Yeah.
Michael used to call me during the trial at 3 a.m. crying, and the primary concern of his was not him, it was his children.
Right.
And I saw them hug him during the trial. They didn't know what was going on, but they knew their father was in distress. And they had the most wonderful father on the planet. And that's all I care about. He loved them. They were his children. They were his family. And that's all I care about.
Something else I want to bring up to the bat here. You know, you got all these groups, all these kid groups. You ever heard of...
Okay, caller. Yep. Okay, let's go out to area code 240. Please state your name and where you're calling from. You're on the King George Radio on a Friday night with Tom Mesereau. 240. It's your turn.
Hi, Tom. My name is Crystal. Thank you for coming on to the show and expressing
Where you from, Crystal?
towards Michael. I'm from Burtonsville,
Where you calling out of?
Burtonsville,
North Carolina?
Maryland.
Maryland.
Yes,
okay,
sir.
Happy Friday night, and thanks for calling. What's your question or thought for Tom?
Well, first of all, I don't have a question. I want to commemorate Mr. Mesereau for all his work of deconstructing the case with Michael, being able to break down every character witness that went against him on the defense team. And I think he did a commendable job in regards to that, and I have the utmost respect for him in that regard, being in a criminal justice major. My question, though, is further stating after the case, sir, what are your thoughts on his daughter's condition, being she successfully improved? What is your thoughts on how the media has been treating her, per se, her grief in regard to them consistently bringing up the case and them having her become witness on stands on multiple cases? What do you think of that, sir?
Well, you know, being Michael Jackson's child, whether you're male or female, is not easy because the media is always desperate for a story. They're always looking for some scandal wherever they can find it or make it up. And they don't want to publish good stuff. They want to publish bad stuff, okay?
Correct. Correct.
Good news doesn't sell. Bad news sells. So
unfortunately.
Scandal sells. Evidence of good deeds does not sell. So they're always looking for someone who's in the spotlight to fall, to stumble, to demonstrate weakness, to make a mistake, whatever it is, so they can blow it up. So the point I'm making, being Michael Jackson's children cannot be simple. It cannot be easy. And especially when you're beautiful and brilliant and you attract people the way his daughter does.
Correct.
She's had a lot of pressure at an early age, even if everyone around her has done their best to protect her and help her be normal. So I have great passion for her, great empathy for her, and I'm not there on a daily basis. I don't know all of what's going on, but for what I've heard, she's doing quite well. And I think she's an extraordinary young girl. And if she can get through these teenage years with all the pressures, normal and abnormal, I think she's going to be an outstanding human being. I think his other children are going to be outstanding human beings, too.
Correct.
You know,
his oldest son, I heard, has done very well.
Yeah, all I can tell you is that during the trial, I would go to Neverland. Nobody would be with me, no media. They didn't know I was going. And I would watch Michael with his children. And he was constantly hugging them, constantly encouraging them. He wanted them to love animals. He wanted them to love people. He wanted them to love literature. He wanted them to explore the world. But he was very protective, lest some harm come to them because of who their father was. And I think he did a very noble job in balancing these pressures and being a good father. And I think you're seeing that in these children. You know, I mean, they're human beings. They're under the spotlight. They're going to stumble and fall and make mistakes like all of us. But I think their father was magnificent. If you look at these children's attitude towards their father, they think their father was the greatest father imaginable. I'm hoping to get through some of the obstacles and the insecurities of youth and do very well, and I think they will.
I think they will, too. But thank you again, sir, for all your work with Michael, and I have the utmost respect for you, sir.
Well, thank you so much for calling, and have a wonderful weekend. Very nice talking to you.
You too. Same.
Thank you.
Take care.
Yes, indeed, and I want to give a shout-out to Luna, who created a sort of timetable of the Wade Robson story, and as I look for that, what is your thoughts of Luna Joe's that commercial she did of your coming on the air along with Kerry?
Well, I saw the commercial briefly. It was wonderful. I think everything Luna Joe does is fantastic. I mean, I don't know where she gets the time or the momentum or the genius that she has to put together these wonderful shows on important events in the life of Michael Jackson. She has a mind that's like a library of things that have happened, and she's done a great service to the legacy of Michael Jackson, a great service to those who loved Michael Jackson and what he stood for. And, you know, I sometimes say to myself, where would we be without Luna Joe putting all this information together for us in the wonderful way she does? So I have the greatest respect for Luna Joe. I've never met her, never spoken to her, but what a wonderful service she has done for the entire Jackson fan community and the reputation and legacy of Michael Jackson. As far as Wade Robson,
and that series, What Did Happen to Michael Jackson, takes you inside to the 2005 trial and really shows you who was there for Michael and who really wasn't. But I do want to get back to the Wade Robson story. We do have a caller. I just want to take care of the callers, if that's okay, before we go to Wade. All right, the caller, you area code 559. You're on the line on King Jordan on a Friday night with Tom Mesereau. Please state your name and where you're calling from. 559. It's your turn.
Good evening. My name is Yvonne, and I'm calling from California.
Well, very nice to talk to you.
I just wanted to call in and to say to Mr. Mesereau that you just inspire me. You just, I am just so grateful for you. I'm just so grateful for you. You know, I appreciate everything that you've done, everything that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate your comments.
Yeah, I mean, I've met you on several occasions, and you know, there's not too many people like you in the world. I just want you to know that.
Well, thank you for your kind remarks. I really appreciate them, and I'm very humbled by your comments.
And that will segue. I had Ann Bremner on, and she said some very kind words that I documented it. So I want you to hear what Ann Bremner said about Tom Mesereau and the Michael Jackson trial. So let's take a listen to this.
Mesereau, he is number one, the best. I used to call him that he was mesmerizing Mesereau. He was awesome. He is awesome.
You saw him in the 2005 trial. How was his work?
For 6 months. I was there for 6 months.
Wow.
Oh, he was fantastic.
Wow.
He's smart. He's organized.
Was his closing and opening arguments very effective, in your opinion?
They were brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, I remember there was a shot of you. We were talking because it was caught on some YouTube or something. When Michael Jackson was, they were showing the outtakes of the Bashir documentary. You came out and you said, you came out and you said Michael took the stand without going to cross-examination. And
exactly.
Tom remembered that. Yes.
Brilliant. Just was a great way to, present a case. I mean, everything was it's like surgical. It was beautifully done, and a masterful job by Tom Mesereau, and including the fact that he used that documentary to present Michael Jackson to the jurors without Michael Jackson testifying. And when the music was playing on the documentary, some of the jurors were tapping their feet.
Yeah, and a very, state like that, area like that, with a very, very, goody two-shoes, and to get a clean sweep, as Tom did, was incredible.
It was incredible, and I was amazed at every day.
So there you have it, Tom. One of my guests, Ann Bremner, praising you to the highest. Your thoughts?
Well, that's very, very kind of her and very generous. Her remarks are very much appreciated. Ann is a brilliant lawyer with a tremendous reputation around the country. And I know she followed the case. I know she was on Nancy Grace a lot, but I didn't watch it very much because I was too busy preparing. But I'm very flattered by her comments and appreciate them very much.
Yes. She said that you were, her nickname was Tom Mesmerizing.
Well, I'm the kind of person that I don't listen to a lot of that stuff too much. When I'm in a trial, my attitude is it's never over till it's over. And if you have a good day, don't overreact. If you don't have a good day, don't overreact. It's a holistic kind of thing. And
a lot of people were keeping score during the trial, and throughout a lot of trials, especially the case of Anthony. It's they almost were keeping score like it was baseball, but you don't do that as an attorney. You don't play that by that rule, right?
Well, a smart trial lawyer never does that, but a lot lot of your less mature trial lawyers, think it's a game, and they think it's like you score it, inning by inning or quarter by quarter, and that's not the way it works. Because anyone who followed the trial may remember when the prosecution asked the judge, the prosecution put on their case, we cross-examined. We put on our case, they cross-examined. Then they had the opportunity to put on a rebuttal case. And they asked the judge if they could play Gavin Arvizo's interview with the Santa Barbara sheriffs. And normally that would be completely inadmissible because, it's what is called hearsay. It doesn't come in. But to my shock, the judge let it in. And I thought it was a terrible ruling. And a lot of the press were saying the case is over, this is Mesereau's worst nightmare, blah, blah, blah. And it wasn't. Because in my closing argument, I challenged the jurors. I said, take a look at it. Watch it very closely. Watch his reactions to this and that and that and this, whatever I said. And after the acquittals, I talked to the foreperson, Paul Rodriguez, very wonderful man. And he said, we looked at it very closely. We followed your advice, and we decided you were right. So, you just never know what's going to happen in a trial. The media, is trying to promote and sensationalize and glamorize and scandalize and all that stuff. But that's not what the lawyer's doing. The lawyer is looking at 13 people, the 12 jurors and the judge, and you're trying to follow the procedures and the rules in an ethical, professional way, and at the same time attack the other side appropriately. And the media frenzy was so great in that case. There were more accredited media following that case than O.J. Simpson and Scott Peterson combined. But my attitude was, I'm in a cocoon. I'm only focusing on 13 people. What's going on outside that courtroom is, their business. And that's how I lived. I lived like a hermit for 6 months during that trial. I wouldn't go out at night. I was in bed at 7:30, latest 8 o'clock every night, up at 3 without fail every day. My staff was dropping updated witness binders on my stairwell in my condominium at all hours of the night. They had a key to where I lived. And, I would get up at 3 in the morning alone with my pot of coffee and my bathrobe and binders everywhere. And I would work for 3.5 hours until I went to court. And we didn't have a lunch break. The judge had a schedule where we would take small breaks and then leave. I think it was 1:30 or 2 every day. It may have been 2. And that's how I lived. The world was going crazy over the case, and I was living like a hermit because that's what I thought it took to win.
Absolutely. We do have, I think, another caller. 310, it's your turn. Who is this?
Hi, it's me.
You're on the phone.
Me. Hi, Dr. Klein.
Is this Dr. Klein? Dr.
I just want to say, Mr. O, I was Michael's doctor for 40 years. I've never met a greater person in my life. I had to go through the first molestation event in a helicopter up in Neverland with Michael and with Johnny Cochran and Howard Weitz, who I have absolutely no respect for. I mean, because this is the most ridiculous case in the world. I mean, this man set Michael up. He gave his son Pentothal. He drugged him. And for them to settle this case was absolutely ridiculous. There was absolutely no evidence that Michael did anything wrong. And I was been through my whole life with everything, with Michael. I got him off of Pentothal in 2003. And with this recent thing with Conrad Murray, I met Murray even before. And I believe in Michael. I have the greatest respect for him. He's the nicest man, but he's been taken down so many terrible paths by so many greedy people. And for you to defend him, it's so very important you stepped up for him because he was just a truly wonderful human being. And we all have our errors, but he was not a child molester. They just wanted to bring peace out of the world. Now, the most important piece of age legislation in the world is called the Ryan White Act. And by 2014, it saved 1 million lives in Africa. And I have to tell you, it was Michael and I under President Bush Sr. who got that law passed. And Michael is unlike anything that anyone really knew, unless you knew him. He lived in my house. And they put me through everything I did because of everything that I know. But I'm trying to come back and tell people about it, and, make people aware of what I do, and really get a salvation of myself, what I've done to me because of what I know, what I've known about Michael. But I want to thank you for bringing forward and being there for him, because I went through the first molestation thing with Garcetti, took my records from the office, and everything had to go up there. And how many people who are white have to have their genitals photographed? That was the most disgusting thing in the world. And the reason why is because they said, the child said he was circumcised, and Michael was not circumcised. I didn't even look at that. I had to turn my back. But they'd take him and tear him down so many roads and tear him down so many places. And people didn't realize here's a man who is revolutionizing the world for children and for the people who are black all over the world. So I just want to thank you, sir. Okay?
Well, thank you very much for your kind, generous comments. Your praise of Michael, I totally agree with. Can't disagree with any of that. And thank you for your very nice remarks. I really appreciate them.
Talk to you if I could. Okay. I just want to say I have the greatest respect for you. And thank you, sir.
Thank you so much.
Be well. Bye-bye.
Thank you. And that was some testament Dr. Klein had to say. Agree?
Very nice remarks by him. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Okay, we have one more caller that's calling in. Let's see what they want. Let's see what they want to say. 516, you're on King Jordan Radio with Tom Mesereau on a Friday night. 516, please state your name and where you're calling from.
Hi, this is Jenny from Long Island, New York. How are you guys?
How you doing?
Good evening. Well, good morning. It's in Europe.
Good morning.
Already 12:20.
This is early. First, I'd like to say, Tom, thank you so very much for championing for Michael. We all in the community just cannot thank you enough for doing what you do. Coming out and speaking, about the real Michael is just, there are no words. I just have a question about the trial, and I just often wonder, I guess from a legal standpoint, and trying to get the jury to see Michael as the man. Is there a reason why they didn't, or you guys didn't think of bringing in any of Michael's, past relationships? Was there a strategy to that? Because I would have thought that would, show Michael as the man. And I just always wondered, reading the transcripts, how come that was one thing that never really was addressed?
Well, first of all, we were expecting a 7 to 8 month trial.
Mm-hmm.
And I decided at about the 5-month mark we had to wind this down. And I had a lot of witnesses I was planning to call who I didn't call. I had a feeling that we were doing very well. I felt the jury was getting what our message was, and I felt it was time to get it to the jury to deliberate. So I cut off a lot of the case we could have continued to present. I didn't want to do anything more after I thought we were winning. Whenever you call a witness, you open up cross-examination. That's true of both sides. And you never know where cross-examination will take you. As I think the prosecution learned when I cross-examined their main witnesses. I think they ended up disasters, most of them. But nevertheless, a client approaches a lawyer, and the client's in distress, and the client needs help and direction. And it's the lawyer's obligation to try and do his or her best to steer the client through this scary, strange, counterintuitive, odd system called the criminal justice system.
Mm-hmm.
And things that you think work outside the courthouse don't work the same way in the courthouse. For example, the client, if they're from the entertainment industry, will think that the trial is on television. They'll hear all these commentators at night think that's the trial. That's not the trial at all. None of those people are in the courtroom all day. None of them are seeing or hearing or feeling the evidence or looking at the witnesses and their demeanor, etc., like the jury is. And the jury's under oath. Most people are not. But the client from the entertainment industry will think, this must be how the trial's going because I'm hearing these negatives or I'm hearing these positive comments. And you've got to keep them, in line and let them know that none of that is really relevant. Only the 12 jurors and the judge count. So I had to make strategic decisions, what was necessary and what was not, at each stage of the case. And I decided we didn't need anything like that. We were doing well. We had really, in my opinion, devastated their case and shown their conspiracy theory was complete nonsense, shown these allegations of child molestation were ridiculous, shown that these very evil, ugly allegations that he would take a cancer-stricken child and give him alcohol that could take his life in order to set him up for molestation. I felt those counts had been completely devastated and felt it was time to get it to the jury and win the case. So that's how I was thinking, and we didn't need anything else, in my opinion. Fortunately, I was correct.
Yes, you were. That's why you're so good at what you do.
Well, thank you. It just, I was there to vindicate him every way I could, keep him out of prison. I don't think he would have lasted in prison. And to me, it was a death penalty case. He'd been represented very poorly before I saw what the prior lawyer had done, Garagos. I was embarrassed. I thought it was just a complete disaster. And I thought everything was going the wrong way.
It was the Garagos show. That's what it was. It wasn't about Michael. It was about him as a lawyer.
That's what I thought. That was my opinion. And I tried to change everything I could, tone things down, focus more on Michael's relationship to his community in Santa Maria where he had chosen to live and where he was very much liked, in my opinion. And I did the very best I could. But I couldn't bring everything in and please everybody. I had to do what I thought it would take to win.
Mm-hmm. Well, once again, I definitely thank you for that. I don't think there's enough thank yous that could be given, to be honest. So
well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your kind remarks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for the call. Okay, Looney Joe put together this Wade Robson montage. After that, I want to get your take on the Wade Robson and Save Chuck situation and what you heard from a lady. But first, I want you to hear this montage where Wade is raising MJ, and then you'll hear from some clips of earlier statements.
Yeah, there's been different times where it'll just be me and Michael. Then there'll be other times where he has other friends over too. This is what Brett said, it's just a slumber party. We just have a lot of fun.
And I've slept in the same bed as Michael. It's just you watch cartoons, you fall asleep. It's just a friendship. And I know he would never do anything to hurt my brother. He's the nicest guy you've ever met.
All right, so at 9 years old, things are starting to happen for you?
Yeah, we moved to America, and Michael helped me out in the beginning, put me in a couple of his videos. And that helped me get like a dance agent and that sort of thing. And so I started dancing in other people's videos, and then got a theatrical agent, started doing commercials and did like guest episodes in Full House and shows like that. And when I was, I think, 11, I got in a rap group, a rap duo, me and this other kid, and we ended up being signed to Sony Records and did an album there. And that's what sort of got me interested in music production. One of the best things I ever had was my teachers, actually, which was my mother, my grandmother, and Michael. And the things that they taught me was, if there was anything that I wanted, they taught me how to visualize. I think the most important thing for kids is to really figure out what they want, realize that anything is possible. So don't hold back in your dreams. Always shoot as high as you possibly can, but be detailed about it.
And you started as a youngster dancing with Michael Jackson?
Yeah.
Going to the ring. Are you still friendly with Michael?
Yeah, we still talk every couple months, catch up.
You do, really?
Yeah.
Well, what's he like?
What's he like? He's a good guy.
He's a good guy?
Yeah.
Show me where he touched you. Nothing ever like that? No nonsense, no shenanigans?
No, but it's like, as long as people don't forget you know, how talented he is and what he's done for the music industry. Think whatever you want about him, but you can't deny his talent. Yeah.
What's the most misunderstood thing about Michael Jackson, do you think, that you know him? Probably a number of things.
That I don't know, that anybody that lives that life is not going to be your average dude. You know what I mean? In the simple ways, I mean.
Yeah.
You know, you live that kind of life and that sort of fame from 5 years old. You're not going to go about your everyday like everybody else because you've never lived a life like everybody else. So how would you know how to do that? So, and I think people take those simple things and turn them into something, you know, 10 times, 100 times more strange than they are.
One of the things I noticed about you, and this goes back to why I said you were a stand-up guy, we covered the trial, and you were one of the few people to stick up for him. Mm-hmm. And why do you think that was? And why was it important for you to stick up for him?
Because he's always been a friend to me. That's what you do for friends, you tell the truth, you know. Yeah, I can't speak for him, but it would be an absolutely painful thing for anybody to go through. And then there's obviously such a huge connection between Michael Jackson and MTV and really starting this real music video generation on MTV. I mean, Michael was really the king of that. So I like all of those connections, and obviously my connection with Michael and all of that coming together is kind of just one of those serendipitous things where all the elements have come together. So I'm excited for a lot of reasons to be a part of this. In general, with Michael, just had a wonderful relationship. I learned so much from him as an artist and as a kind human being. And it's my goal to try and just continue as much as I can in my own little world. We talk so much about him as the pop legend, which is important, but it's nice to really remember that he was a man, that he was a father, and that's what it's really about, is a father and his children. And he was a wonderful dad, and you know, at least they had the time with him that they did. But I'm starting on Cirque du Soleil Michael Jackson show. So it's, you know, the equivalent of the Beatles' Love show that they have, or the Elvis show, but for Michael, which is you know, exciting and terrifying all at the same time because it's such a huge responsibility. But that was why I took it on. You know, Michael was such a huge part of my career and life. We were friends for 20 years before he passed, since I was 7. So it's an opportunity for me to give back a little bit to his legacy. It's such a big part of his legacy, and to make sure as much as I can that it's done right and that it really represents his essence. I never forgot one moment of what Michael did to me, but I was psychologically and emotionally completely unable and unwilling to understand that it was sexual abuse.
So what are you alleging that he actually did?
He sexually abused me from 7 years old until 14.
I know it's a difficult and personal question, but can you be more specific? Because you're accusing someone who is deceased of criminal activity.
Yeah.
So I need you to be a little more specific. Did he perform sexual acts on you? Did he force you to perform sexual acts on him? What was the nature of the abuse?
Yes, exactly what you said. He performed sexual acts on me and forced me to perform sexual acts on him.
When you testified in 2005, and you took the stand and you raised your right hand and you swore under oath that nothing sexual ever happened between you and Michael Jackson, why did you lie?
You know, I said what I understood, and I said what I was able to say. From 7 years old, from day one of the abuse, Michael told me that we loved each other and that this was love, that this was an expression of our love. And then you'd follow that up with, you know, but if you ever tell anyone what we're doing, both of our lives and our careers will be over. When I was 11, when the first trial was going on, the criminal investigation in '93, he would call me every day and role play and tell me the same sort of things, and also tell me then that if anyone ever thought that we did these things, any of these sexual things, that both of us would go to jail. There was no money, there was no you must lie. Michael, when he would talk to me before these things were going on, and he would call me every day as these things were happening, it was complete manipulation and brainwashing. It wasn't any sense of the truth on the phone. He would role play with me and train me for these scenarios.
And when I say his name to you this morning, what do you think of?
Heartbreak, pain, anger, and compassion. There's there's no excuse for what he did to me, and I believe many others. But he was a troubled man, and every effect has its cause. You know, the image that one presents to the world is not the whole explanation of who someone is. You know, Michael Jackson was, yes, an incredibly talented artist, and with an incredible gift. He was many things, and he was also a pedophile and a child sexual abuser.
Video courtesy of Luna Joe 67, a very good compilation, Tom, where you hear Wade Robson at least 10 different times praising and saying such smart things. And when you hear that package, first of all, what comes to mind, and how do you think of the job that Luna Joe put together, that package?
Well, I repeat, and I always will repeat, that Luna Joe is just absolutely fabulous in her dedication to the legacy of Michael Jackson, her dedication to the historical record of Michael Jackson, her knowledge of various reports, media, extravaganzas, you name it. She seems to have it all in her head, and she seems to know how to extrapolate whatever she needs to create the record that's necessary to understand and appreciate and respect Michael Jackson. So she's just fabulous. You know, I called Wade Robson as my first witness in the criminal trial. I spoke to him.
Which is very important.
Well,
which is very important, as you pointed out, because you want to get the jury, you want to get them with somebody who is very believable.
Well,
and in your opinion,
first of all, I had to wrestle with the idea of, do we need to put on a defense, because I felt that the cross-examination of the prosecution's witnesses had been repeatedly devastating and revealing. And I felt that 99.9% of criminal defense lawyers in America would have rested after the prosecution rested, not put on a case, because everybody was saying it's an impossible case to win, you can't do it. And I think a lot of criminal defense lawyers, if they had cross-examined as effectively as I did, would have said, I think I can hang this jury, that'll look like a victory for me, I'm going to do this. I'm not going to risk cross-examination of my witnesses, which could change the trial completely. Because any time you put on a witness, whether you're the prosecutor or the defense lawyer, your witness is going to be cross-examined and you don't know what's going to happen. So I had to think long and hard about it. Said, you know, I think I would hang the jury if I rest, and I think that I'll be perceived as having done a great job by hanging the jury, and what the media was saying was an impossible case. But I said, what's that going to mean for Michael Jackson? It means these prosecutors will retry the case. The judge will probably change some of his ruling that turned out to be good for us, even though I thought he was very pro-prosecution. He was trying to be balanced and fair in his own way. And he treated me very well and my team very well, so I respect Judge Melville for that. But he really was fundamentally pro-prosecution.
But everybody says, Tom, and tell me if this is true or not, generally speaking, the judge is more inclined to be on the prosecution side. Is that true? And if it is true, are they playing by the rules?
Well, it's very true. You know, there was a period in American history, the 1960s, the 1970s, where you had pro-defense judges. But that's long gone. You know, you have to assume that any judge you appear in front of is going to be pro-prosecution. Some judges are fairer than others. Some are more balanced than others. Some are more willing to acknowledge injustice than others. But remember, being a judge has some political requirements. Sometimes they have to be elected, or they have to be appointed, which means you have to have political supporters. In California, you can be appointed or elected, and if you're appointed, you then have to run for election. So there's a political component to what judges have to do to survive. So what you're saying is correct.
Since we are coming up, though, on the, I'll just get you back to Wade in a second. We are coming up to, in October, it'll be 20 years that O.J. Simpson was acquitted. Now, in the idea that we're talking about judges, what is your honest and full opinion of Judge Ito?
You know, Judge Ito, throughout his career, was one of the brightest and one of the fairest judges in Los Angeles. He was a former prosecutor. His wife is a police officer. But nevertheless, he tried as best he could to be balanced and fair. And the defense bar acknowledged that in a world of pro-prosecution judges, this man really tried to be fair and follow the law. And unfortunately, after the O.J. Simpson acquittal, his career was permanently damaged. He could never get to the Court of Appeals, which is a higher court, even though he deserved to be there. And my reaction to your question is maybe some of the behavior he demonstrated in the Simpson case, given the enormous media glare, in retrospect, he probably would have changed, but I think he's one of the best judges we've had in the history of L.A. County. I think he did his best to try and follow the law and be fair to everybody, and I think he got a bad rap in many ways. I really do.
Absolutely, and now we are coming back in 20 years. Just a brief glimpse of before we get back to Wade, that whole trial. Did the prosecution win it, or did the defense win? Let me rephrase that. Did the prosecution lose it, or did the defense win it? What do you think is more closer to the truth?
I think there was a little of both. I think the defense lawyers were brilliant. I think Johnny Cochran was the best trial lawyer I've ever seen, the most talented I've ever seen. He combined enormous experience with enormous skill and with a great sense of humility and compassion and kindness to others. And he knew how to seize the moment and knew strategically what he had to do. He knew when to be ruthless. He knew when to be respectful. He knew when to be kind and generous. And at the same time, he was vigorously trying to defend his client. And he was just the most brilliant trial lawyer I know of. He was also joined by Barry Scheck, who was one of the greatest lawyers in American history. His pioneering use of DNA to exonerate innocent people is unparalleled. He's one of the greatest lawyers ever, and he was brilliant in that case.
Alan Dershowitz.
Alan Dershowitz was sort of behind the scenes doing, motion work and legal research. He didn't try any of the case, and he was a great addition.
Was recently accused of inappropriate sex with a minor, but the timeline didn't make any sense. To make a quick statement about that, he showed proof that he wasn't at these places that they were, but it's just he said it was more of an indictment of the lawyer actually bringing that up, but that's another story. But you do have a good feeling about Judge.
I mean, back to your question. Peter Neufeld was also a DNA expert. You had F. Lee Bailey had some great moments in the trial. I don't think Shapiro,
he was a great cross-examiner. I've been told by some of my legal analysts that come up here.
Well, I studied F. Lee Bailey.
Would you agree with that?
I studied F. Lee Bailey's books. He's written some great books that any trial lawyer should read and think about. Johnny Cochran wrote 2 wonderful books. As I said, Barry Scheck, Peter Neufeld, great lawyers. I don't think you needed Shapiro on the team. I don't think he added much of anything, in my opinion. But the defense did a fabulous job.
Was he let go, Shapiro?
No. He was there throughout the trial. He took some witnesses. He didn't do the opening or
was
the
Howard Weitzman there?
No, Howard Weitzman initially represented O.J. Simpson, he left the representation of Simpson, and there are differing opinions on why he left. Reportedly, he says that he wanted to leave. Simpson claimed he got rid of him, but who knows what the truth is? I wasn't there. I don't know. I really don't know. But
right.
Weitzman was with him initially when you had the Bronco chase. Weitzman met Simpson at Simpson's home, and then Shapiro ended up replacing Weitzman. But the
that was just fascinating.
By the same token, I think the prosecution, did a poor job. They were dedicated, to getting a conviction, but they seemed very immature and very outmatched by the defense. And they could have done a much better job presenting their case.
I totally agree. But I did want to get back to the Wade Robson. You heard all the denials of any impropriety of Michael Jackson's part on the Great Luna Joe video we did. What's your thoughts, first of the different statements and what you uncovered via Pearl Jr.? If you could share that with the audience, I'd greatly appreciate that.
Well, as I've said many times, I called Wade Robson and his mother and his sister as witnesses in the Michael Jackson defense case. And they were all very supportive of Michael Jackson. Wade was a very bright, intelligent, articulate, poised, professional young man who was my first witness. And when you put on a case, you always want to start, if you can, with strong witnesses and end with strong witnesses. Some of the more lukewarm witnesses you strategically tend to put in the middle, and I started with him because he was so powerful in his defense of Michael Jackson and so powerful in his claim that the prosecution's allegations were outrageous. And
was that the opinion of, was that the opinion of just you, or was that the opinion of Susan as well?
Oh, I think everyone who supported
The
Michael
whole team?
Jackson, this was a powerful witness. So, I was in utter shock when I read about this civil suit, and my first reaction was he wants money, and he knows that the estate is vulnerable because the estate is run by Branca and Weitzman, who he probably believed, and his lawyers probably believed, would never try a case in defense of his claim. And I've always said that, Howard Weitzman signed the settlement agreement in the Geordie Chandler case. He appeared at a press conference to announce the settlement. His prior firm settled the Jason Francia case, which was a multi-million-dollar settlement. I know Howard has been on television saying he was against that settlement. I don't believe it for a second. I had lunch with Randy Jackson, in San Francisco a number of months ago, and he told me that Johnny Cochran wanted to try the case, but that his belief was that Howard wanted to settle it. And if you read Randall Sullivan's chapter on the Geordie Chandler incident, he says that reportedly Weitzman was the one who really wanted to settle it. So I wasn't there. I'm not a witness to this. But when Weitzman says I was against the settlement, I don't believe it for 5 minutes. Sullivan also reports that Branca, who was not representing Michael in the case, was not a litigator. He was his music lawyer, but Branca didn't think Michael could make it through a trial. And I suspect that's correct. But my point is that when Robson and then Safechuck filed these claims, and when they looked on the other side and saw Branca and Weitzman, they must have been celebrating because they knew these guys would never try the case. And I'm not representing the estate. I don't speak for the estate. I don't know what their strategy or tactics have been in this case. I've not been part of it. But Pearl Jr., who has been following the case and going to court and checking the files and talking to the court clerk, she showed up recently, as she reported to me, and said there's no case number and no file to examine. And I said to her, if that's the case, then they've settled. And if they've settled, in my opinion, and it's just speculation on my part, I think the estate has paid millions of dollars to Robson and Safe.
Really?
I really believe that. I'm not, again, a witness to any of this. I can't speak based upon experience or fact in this case because I haven't been in the case. But this plaintiff's lawyer, Gradstein, is an excellent lawyer. And by the way, he's also, as the last I checked, was representing Quincy Jones against the estate. And he's a very, very respected, experienced lawyer. And he aggressively went after the estate on behalf of Wade Robson and Safechuck. And I think he took some of his strategies from Larry Feldman's work in the early 90s, when Larry Feldman would periodically give a media interview and say something very, very disturbing about Michael Jackson. And in the end, Weitzman and Company settled. And they settled, apparently, for an awful large sum of money, reportedly $20 million. That probably includes interest and a whole bunch of other things. But nevertheless, if you wanted to fight this case, the last people you wanted on the other side were the people you had, in my opinion, Branca and Weitzman, because of the history.
Right.
If you wanted to really send a message that you were going to fight this thing to the end, you needed other lawyers who were known to just take things to the limit. And that's not what you had. So when Pearl Jr. told me that you couldn't find the case number of the case file, I said to her, this suggests to me that money's been paid confidentially. They've either, dismissed the case quietly, under seal. Maybe they went to a private judge to try and just resolve it quietly. But this is exactly what I predicted would happen. I said these plaintiffs were never going to stop this case unless a judge threw it out. And if a judge hasn't formally thrown this case out in a way which is believable, I think that quietly the estate paid a large sum of money to make everything go away. They probably decided...
No, I was under the influence that the Wade Robson lawyer was asking in the neighborhood of $10 million. When you settle, can you just make an educated guess on the possibility of what the attorney of Wade Robson got? Not saying that
I really
an opinion.
I really can't because I'm not involved in the case. But consider this. I'm told there was a motion to dismiss the plaintiff's case. The plaintiffs, of course, are Wade Robson and Jimmy Safechuck. There was a motion to dismiss saying they filed too late. And that probably was the opportune time for the defense to settle the case, because if that motion were heard and the judge said you filed too late, the case would be over for Robson and Safechuck. On the other hand, if the judge said, you haven't filed too late, and as an analogy, you could look at the Catholic Church, the civil cases against the Catholic Church in America, where young men were stepping forward many years later saying I was molested, and the laws were such that they would accommodate someone who claimed they had repressed memory or post-traumatic stress disorder or whatever psychiatric problem was attributed to the fact that you were molested when you were young and you lived in shame and denial, that kind of thing. The courts were accommodating that kind of claim, late claim, more and more. So if the judge didn't throw the case out, the defense would be stuck with the possibility of a public trial. You're in the right, and they are in the right, because I don't think Michael molested anybody. I suspect Weitzman and Branca made a business decision that we don't want the bad publicity and probably settled for millions of dollars confidentially. That would be my guess, but it's pure speculation on my part.
A lot of fans want to know that, it's been coming up on 6 years, and, a lot of lawyers, 9 out of 10 would, say, forget my client. A lot of people always wondered why, and I'm not against it, I'm very for it, but how come you stood the test of time, and how come you're so much in Michael's favor still after he's long and gone? And what keeps you with Michael's spirit that, let's say, another lawyer wouldn't have with a normal client? A lot of people have asked me that.
Well, I just live my life as I think I should. I do my best, like everybody else. Nobody's perfect. Everybody has flaws. Everybody makes mistakes. Everybody gets embarrassed from time to time. We're all human. We're not God. I live life as I choose, and I believe that this man's legacy needs to be preserved, and his reputation needs to be protected as best you can. And I just express what I think is correct. You know, I'm told there are a lot of different factions that are sort of at war with each other in the Jackson fan community. I'm not involved in
I
any
did
of
want
that.
to bring that up to you. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, Tom Mesereau was kind enough to join us because of all the commotion before. Tom, welcome back to the show, and I'd like to get your take. Well, not your take. The story that I was reading. You are doing a pro bono case. Can you explain that to the audience before we get to the question?
For the last 17 or 18 years, I've gone to Alabama every year to do a pro bono case. Almost all of them have been capital murder cases where a client could have faced the death penalty. Some have faced the death penalty. Some of them we've been able to convince the prosecution not to seek death, but they've all been capital murder cases with exception of one straight murder case that I got an acquittal on with my dear friend Charles Salvaggio in Birmingham. And I did one civil rights-related case where the police, in my opinion, brutally beat up a young black man in Birmingham, and it was terribly unjust. So I've been doing these cases for 17, 18 years, and I'm about to go to Birmingham, Alabama in May to defend a young black man charged with killing an off-duty police officer.
And do you have to have an inkling before you take these pro bono cases? I mean, does it have to look like a slam dunk for the? Does it have to have a fighting chance for the defense in order for you to take it?
Not necessarily, no. I believe everyone has a right to a superior defense. I believe that poor people particularly are often denied a good defense. And I think the way our system operates, everybody, whether they're rich, poor, famous or not famous, sophisticated or unsophisticated, educated or uneducated, has a right to a vigorous, passionate, competent defense. So most of these cases are very difficult cases if you look at the evidence, you know, at least at the beginning. But we've had very good results in 17, 18 years. No one has gotten the death penalty. A number have been acquitted, a number have been dismissed. Some got convicted of lesser included offenses, not the maximum type offense. And I'm very proud of the work I do with my dear friend Charles Salvaggio in Birmingham, a terrific lawyer, the best criminal defense lawyer in the city, and it's something I believe in doing.
Okay, we have at same MJ fan. This is via Twitter. He runs a good Vindication Michael site, but he wants to know your opinion on Jim Clemente, the FBI agent, quote, who says MJ was a pedophile. Mesereau was interviewed by him last month, I believe, and last November. Ask him what he thinks of a professional investigator who would ignore all the facts and label MJ a pedophile despite all the exonerations and evidence. In your opinion, was Clemente truly an objective witness for the prosecution, had he been there, of course, or was he in cahoots with them? And then he writes in parentheses, Clemente was scheduled to testify for the prosecution, and he thinks he got sick, and that's why he can't. That's one question he has.
Well, I think Jim Clemente is a sincere person. He freely admits that he was molested as a child. I think he's convinced himself that based on the evidence he's seen and he's heard, that Michael was guilty. But he's wrong. He doesn't know all the facts. He never knew Michael. I don't think he appreciates just what the cross-examination did to these witnesses, because they were not, in my opinion, telling the truth. And he has limited information. I think he's very biased. I think he's very prejudiced. I think he tends to be very prejudiced towards the prosecution. And I think he's dead bang wrong, and he's lucky he didn't testify because I would have chewed him to pieces as far as I'm concerned.
Yes, that's you also were kidding around with him when you did that interview. Question 2 is, ask him if any info on Chandler, such as current whereabouts, whether or not he had reconnected to June Chandler, and why he thinks Jordy did not testify in 05, and what Jordan's friends were prepared to testify to in the 2005 trial.
Well, I believe Jordy Chandler didn't testify because he knew that he was never molested. I will always believe that his father arranged the situation, influenced his son to say these things. And
Evan
I think
Chandler?
they were true. That's what I believe. I never knew Evan Chandler, and I never met Jordy Chandler. And I wasn't Michael's lawyer at the time, and I'm not a witness to any of these events. But I studied the record as best I could. I looked at the evidence as best I could. And in my personal opinion, I think Jordy was influenced by his father. I think it was a money-making opportunity. And I think he fled because he didn't want to testify, because he knew he wasn't telling the truth, and he knew he'd be destroyed. And I did get calls from some potential witnesses who told me that he had told them that it didn't happen. And my investigator had obtained some information to the same effect, that people were willing to come forward to say he told them it didn't happen. Now, of course, the prosecution's response would have been like the response to the fact that Gavin Arvizo reportedly told a teacher that it never happened. I think they would have said, well, this is what happens to victims of child molestation, that they typically go into denial and get embarrassed and don't want to reveal what happened. So that would have been their response. But nevertheless, I have never met him, never talked to him, never met his father, never talked to his father, wasn't involved in the 93 case. But I believe he didn't want to testify because they were asking him to say something that was false.
Okay, just 2 more here. Ask him if he knows, do you know of any law schools or journalism schools that use the 2005 trial and or the 1993 case in their studies?
You know, I really don't. I get calls from lawyers once in a while who use my cross-examination of the Arvizos in courses they teach on cross-examination, and in particular defending cases like this. I've had a couple of lawyers call me who wanted me to come speak and talk about my examination of Gavin Arvizo and his sister and brother. So I know lawyers are using some of these transcripts in their studies, but I really don't know much more than that. I haven't looked at the curriculum. I don't know what books they're reading, and that's all I really have to say about that.
Okay, same fan on Twitter also asks, can you please ask him to explain how was the prosecution changed the dates on the alleged molestation from the time Michael Jackson was initially charged in December 2003 to when he was indicted by the grand jury in April 2004. In December 2003, Michael was charged with 7 counts of lewd acts, 1 count of attempted lewd act, of administering alcohol, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit child abduction between February 20th and March 12th, 2003. Notice how both charges and the timeline have changed between the filling and the initial complaint and the grand jury indictment. Why was the prosecution allowed to do this? Isn't this illegal? Question mark.
It's not illegal per se. I mean, they can take the position that, you know, as we investigated and obtained new evidence and got a better understanding of the facts, we changed our beliefs about, you know, what happened and when it happened. That would be their excuse. I think they were not being honest. I think they were not being professional, and I think they were doing anything they could to win. You have to remember that before I got in the case, Garagos, Michael Jackson's lawyer, who was an eventually fired, went to the media and said he had an alibi. And I think when he did that, he triggered a response by the prosecution. They began to look into what the so-called alibi was, and they began to see that there were problems in her timeline. And I think because the defense telegraphed to the prosecution what the defense was likely to be, that it permitted the prosecution to get some information they didn't need to know. And I think in the process, they changed their timeline, thinking it would be a more solid case if they did. I don't think they were being honorable. I don't think they were being professional. I think they were doing anything they felt they needed to do to win.
They went at all costs, and this is going to be the 10th year. The final thing for the night, and we do thank Tom Mesereau, is the story with Bill Cosby. I'll just play this quick clip that I had with Richard Herman, and I want to get your take on Bill Cosby, and then we'll wrap it up. Last time we had you here, controversial subject was Bill Cosby, and a lot of people, to my surprise, took your side, that a lot of these people are out for things. Well, the last time it was about 13 to 14 accusers. Now we're up to 28 accusers. So, do you still stand on the same way with Bill Cosby? What's your thoughts as we speak right now on February 5, 2015, with 28 accusers?
Well, you know, here's the situation with this. My take on it, and all these accusers. So someone's telling a story here, and someone's lying, and someone's telling the truth. But you know, in the 60s and in the early 70s, it was almost, it was like a sexual revolution, and people were having a lot of sex, and people were getting themselves in situations and wanting to be in those situations and consenting to having sex and sexual relations and with many different people, not just with one. And you know, when you carried on like that those years, and now 25 years later you look back on it and you think again, well, maybe I didn't really want that to happen, and then you say I was raped. Yeah, rape is a different story. Rape is a crime. There's a definition for it. It's non-consensual, and you said no. And so again, I don't know if he raped all these people. No one's going to know that. But it seems to me, if he was out there raping everybody all those years, someone would have gone to the police. Some charges would have been brought against him. There would have been a couple slam dunk cases there. Not one.
It was a settlement.
Yeah, a settlement, but you settle for a lot of different reasons. Michael Jackson settled cases too. You settled cases for a lot of different reasons, not necessarily because you're admitting to the conduct. You know, legal fees get out of control, press gets crazy. If you can shut someone up with a few dollars and end it right there where they can't talk about it with anyone, sometimes that's a good decision to make. And we don't know. I don't know. 25 years later, 30 years later, claiming you were raped when you went to a guy's room, drank 10 bottles of wine with him, got naked and got in bed with him, and all of a sudden in the morning you realize you had sex and he raped me, you know, that's bullshit. So that's what you got to call it. That's not right. And it does a disservice to women these days who really have been raped, these kind of cases like this. So I feel, you know, these women, sometimes I think a lot of them are recreating history. Maybe, you know, he did on a few of them, and they were afraid to go to the authorities, and they just been living with it all their lives. And if that's the case, it's horrible. I have a sister, I have daughters. It's horrible if that's what he did.
What about that model? Was nothing
I don't know. That model. That model is a publicity whore, and any way she can get her name in the news, her time has come and gone, and it's a hard thing. It's like a boxer that just stays on too long, you know, and they got nothing left, and they get killed. She's got nothing left. I don't know, you know, but she has to get her name in the press. So rather than take a naked selfie of herself and make believe someone stole it, she's out there, you know, jumping on this bandwagon. But her 3-4 minutes of fame are fizzling out now. This whole thing is fizzling out. He's outperforming again. People are cheering him on. We're never going to know. That's the problem with them not doing anything 20 years ago.
That these people have sour grapes, and maybe they did something and they were promised X, Y, and Z, and they did consent, and 25 years later, as you say, they have the sour grapes. They did have sex. It wasn't rape, But now that, like, most of them, 90% of them are nothing, except for the model that I mentioned, do you think maybe that's a possibility?
Yeah, and he was in Hollywood, and he was a big deal in Hollywood. And even these days, guys talk a lot of garbage to women and ladies. That's the reality of it. Guys have one mission. They want to get you in bed, and they'll say a lot of junk to get you in bed, and that's how it's been over the years. So here he is, a big Hollywood guy, and I'm sure he was talking a lot of garbage to these girls, making promises that maybe he had no intention of living up to, and them, gullibly believing it, agreeing to go to bed with him in the hopes of getting a role in a TV show or a movie, or getting introduced to a major producer or someone. Maybe that seduced them into having sex with him. But that's not rape. that's more along the lines of fraud. It's not rape.
Okay, Tom, our final story of the evening, Bill Cosby. First of all, your take on what you heard of Richard Herman, and your take on the whole Bill Cosby comedian story of allegations of rape.
Well, I agree with most of what Richard had to say. I think he spoke very intelligently and very perceptively about the situation. Now, he wasn't there and I wasn't there. I'm not a witness to anything. I have a lot of suspicions about these late claims and people jumping on the bandwagon to make more late claims. But what Richard didn't address that's very disturbing are these allegations that, along with, non-consensual sex, i.e. rape, that he gave them drugs, because, that puts it into a whole other stratosphere. If he really was drugging these women, that's someone who could be easily doing life in prison. And that's a very serious allegation, and it's hard for me to even imagine that a number of women would be date raped by him and not reported to the police. That makes no sense at all. My gut feeling is that a lot of these women were enamored with Bill Cosby because he was successful and powerful and wealthy, and he could open doors for them, they hoped. And, he probably was feeling empowered and, a brash young man, arrogant and, out there to get laid as much as he could, and I don't doubt that's way down. But to take it to another level where he was forcing them to have sex and even willing to drug them, I don't buy it at all. I don't buy it. I think a lot of these women were hoping they could profit from being with him, and they're probably not terribly happy about their lack of success and his great success. I think there's a lot of sour grapes and a lot of fabrication in this mix, and everybody jumping on the bandwagon at this late stage is strange to me. Very, very odd.
Interesting. Most of America, in the court of public opinion, just like in the Michael Jackson case, had him guilty. But you bring up definitely an opposite polar side to that, and people got to really think that's a possibility of him not being.
Well, that's what the media can do to you, because even after the Michael Jackson acquittals, there were a lot of Americans who thought he was guilty. That's what the media can do to you. And, they don't get ratings on good news. They get ratings on scandal and bad news. So they'll embellish and exaggerate anything they can to get ratings. It's too late for all these women to be making these claims. It's something suspicious about all these women saying they were drugged and never reported it. I generally don't buy any of this stuff.
That's very interesting, and, the fans should know this, that Tom did this for you guys and me. He was tired, so I give you extra props, and I can't thank you enough for coming on part 2 due to the the fuzzy stuff that, this day and age, I'm surprised we have that. But Tom was nice enough to come on a second time so we could answer those questions. He did that a special favor for me, and Tom, from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for doing that, and thanks for joining us for such a triple overtime, if you will. You answered everybody's question to the T, and we appreciate that so much.
Thank you so much for having me. Thanks so much for having me. It's always an honor and privilege to be on your show, and my best to the fans. And everybody keep the faith.
The fans love you. There's no question about it. No more than anybody that's attached to Michael. I can honestly say that fans do love you. And if any fans are, listening right now and they love you, you have any message for them?
Well, yes, I think the Michael Jackson fan community is the best community in the world. And, you asked me a question before there was a technical problem earlier about fans disagreeing. Well, Michael Jackson was an individualist, and he believed in freedom of expression. He believed in freedom to be who you are, but he also believed in respect for others. And I think all the Jackson fans should believe what they truly believe, look into their heart, and have the courage and the individuality to express themselves, but treat each other with dignity and respect, because there are people who disagree with you, and there's nothing wrong with that. Express who you are, be proud of who you are, love who you are, but treat others with dignity and respect.
But no fighting. I don't think Mike would like that.
No,
disagreeing, yes. One last thought. It's Black History Month. Black History Month. What is? Give me one word for Black History Month. I know you're an advocate of black people and the ups and downs of them. If you have a thought to me as opposed to show for Black History Month, it hasn't got much play for this year for some reason. You have a thought on that?
By any means necessary, but treat each other with dignity.
Amen to that. Thanks a million, Tom. We'll speak to you soon, and God bless you.
Same to you. Thank you so much.
Ladies and gentlemen, that was Tom Mesereau, and we were having the technical problems, like I said. He did come on part 2, so I want to give him props for that. Give all the props to same fan, Luna Joe 67, and everybody else who shared and did things like that. Okay, MJ fans that are still listening, Kerry Anderson this Thursday here on King Jordan Radio.